I really want to make it clear that this is not about change. But then, you know, it's not about changing anything. It's not about trying to make things better or trying to fix things. And it's important to emphasize that because the personality will bring that into play here. It will just bring it into play here. It'll be looking for an outcome. Right? It's not that meditation doesn't make a difference, but the difference it makes is not that it changes what's happening. That's not the difference that it makes. The difference that it makes is no matter what happens, you're the same. No matter what happens, you're unaffected by what's happening because you're the space that it's happening in. You're the light of awareness with what's happening. When you're practicing meditation and you're aware of the body breathing, it's a short distance to travel. When you're aware of the body breathing, it's a short distance to travel to then come to the recognition and the experience that it's not just that you're aware of the body breathing, you are the awareness that's aware of the body breathing, and that awareness that's aware of the body breathing is always there. It's always there experiencing your life. You thought that that was the body and the personality. No. And the reason that it's easy to make that mistake is because the awareness has no form. It doesn't show up, and it won't show up. It's like my teacher says, when you're dreaming at night, the dream is being generated by the mind, right? And in order for the dream to work, the mind has to identify itself with the character in the dream in order to experience the dream, right? But the mind that generated the dream never appears. In the same way as we live our life, right? The awareness that is our true nature never appears. It is the experiencer of what's appearing, but it never appears. And so that makes it seem as if it's not there, and seem as what is there is the content of the experience, the body and the personality, instead of the awareness. So this is why if we keep moving our attention away from that misunderstanding that's generated by thinking, right, it becomes more possible and even probable that we recognize this awareness that's experiencing my life is me, and it has no form, and it's unaffected by what's happening because it's not a physical body that things can happen to, and it's not a personality that's been conditioned that can get its feelings hurt, right? Or get angry, or all the rest of it, right? It's just the experiencer of all that. And so the difference it makes is not that it changes what's happening, but it changes the way it's occurring to you. It's changing the way it's occurring to you. So it's not, and what I mean by that is changing the way it's occurring to you. It's not happening to this body anymore. It's not happening to this personality anymore, right? It's happening in the light of awareness, and the light of awareness has no form, and it's not affected by what's happening. It's that simple. But it's not that simple because the conditioning has it be different than that, and that's what is being generated in the thought process. That's what you're used to. That's what happens by itself, mechanically and automatically. That's why I say, you walk out of this room after you sit in meditation for 15 minutes, right? And you fall right back into the shit, right? Because that's got so much influence, right? Because it's all around you all the time. Everybody's being a ghost. Everybody's dissatisfied. Everybody's upset. Everybody thinks they're a physical body. Everybody's being a personality. So it really takes practice to not fall back into that situation again. We start out formally, practicing formally, because if we practice formally, it's a little easier to do. But the idea is that at some point, this practice formally becomes a practice informally. This practice formally becomes how I'm paying attention to my life all the time. I was listening to my teacher give a talk today out in LA. And he said it's important for us to be aware of the nature of hell, right? Because the way these teachings talk about the kingdom of heaven on earth, right, is hell and heaven are here at the same time, right? Depends on what glasses you're wearing. Depends on whether you see what you see when you look. And so it's important to know when you're in hell. And he mentioned the 4 characteristics of a hell realm are anger, hatred, revenge, and fear. So it's important to notice when you're experiencing anger, hatred, revenge, or fear, because if you're experiencing that, right, and you're not aware of your true nature, you're in hell. You're in hell. That same hell, if you shift and become aware of your true nature, right, so that there is nothing that can affect you, then you're in heaven. Same reality, same exact reality. Right? So it's not about changing anything, fixing anything, making anything better. No. It's about experiencing the truth. It's about experiencing your true nature so that the things that you were trying to change and fix and make better clear up just in the process of being with them. Just in the process of being with them, right? Because if you're being with them as what you actually are, there's no resistance to it. You're not trying to hold on to it if it's good. You're not trying to get away from it if it's bad. You just keep being the same all the time. And so this process that's occurring the way it's occurring, right, it changes on its own. It's always changing anyway. It changes on its own. But the direction it's changing in changes in the light of your awareness. So that means that it does get better, okay? But that's not the goal. That's a side effect. That's not why we're doing this. That's what happens. And it only happens when you succeed in experiencing it from your true self, when you're looking at it from a real view. So I wanted to share something here. One of my teachers that I really appreciate and enjoy is Joan Tollefson. Some of you may have heard me mention her before, right? She puts out a what they used to call a blog, right? A written piece on maybe twice a week. And Joan is in her 70s. She has one arm. She's gay, and she has a colostomy bag. Right? So you would think, oh, the poor thing, right? But that's not her experience. And so this is what she wrote today. This is called Coming Home. I'm sometimes asked, and she's been teaching this for, 35, 40 years, like that, right? So she's a teacher. She's experiencing the truth. I sometimes get asked, what do I do when disturbing feelings, unsettled energies, troubling thoughts, dark moods, or unwanted emotions show up? Let me read that again. I'm sometimes asked, what do I do when disturbing feelings, unsettled energies, troubling thoughts, dark moods, or unwanted emotions show up? That'd be a good question for all of us, right? What do I do? I've noticed that when such things arise for me, thought often proposes all kinds of solutions to this disturbance. Buy some beer and start drinking again. Stop writing and holding meetings and go into a permanent retirement because you have no idea what you're doing. Binge watch a really disturbing crime series on Netflix until after midnight. Scroll through YouTube for highly charged political commentaries and watch them. Oh yes, and whatever you do, be sure to breathe as shallowly as possible. And maybe try picking and biting your fingers. So far, I haven't gone for the beer. She used to be an alcoholic. So far, I haven't gone for the beer or given up writing and holding meetings, and I suspect I won't do either of those anytime soon. But I have done all the other things. Netflix, YouTube, finger biting, barely breathing. And that's okay. It definitely beats some of the things I did in the past. such as getting blackout drunk, chain smoking cigarettes, shooting heroin, or waking up in bed with someone I had no memory of ever seeing before. This is a spiritual teacher. But I do know there is another possibility when disturbance arises. I write books about it, after all, and yet even after all these years and all these books, it often takes a while to get there. That other possibility is very simple. Sit down in silence and simply be present. Do nothing else. Breathe deeply. Feel the body. Hear whatever sounds show up. See the colors and shapes, the light and shadow. Feel the bodily sensations. Allow the thoughts that arise to pass through. Resist nothing. Just be. Be still. Sometimes there's an instant relief, everything settles. I'm home. But sometimes that doesn't happen right away. Sometimes the agitated or restless energy feels unbearable, like I'm going to explode if I don't get up and do something. But maybe it's possible not to move, to let it be, to find out if this energy really is unbearable or if it just feels like it will kill me. What happens if I simply allow this sense of urgency to be here, not resisting, not needing it to be different, surrendering completely? Eventually, everything settles. The energy smooths out. I'm home. We all have the same home. The openness here, now, this boundless, indivisible, aware presence that is always, by its very nature, allowing everything and clinging to nothing. This home is never actually absent. It is ever present, always waiting to welcome us back whenever thoughts, storylines, inner weather conditions, and old habit energies have seemingly carried us away into troubled waters. We simply need to stop running and shift our attention to what is most intimate, most trustworthy, and discover that we are already here. We are just pretending otherwise. So I hope you can get, the reason I wanted to read that here is because that sounds like a neurotic person, doesn't it? You know, somebody that has a lot of bad habits and suffered a lot in her life, from a lot of her behaviors, drinking, drug use, smoking, poor relationships. So that stuff comes up from time to time for her because it's in her stack. It's in her conditioning, it's in her past experience, right? But when it comes up right now, she sees it for what it is. That's what she's saying. She sees it for what it is. And it may come up and control her behavior to some extent, not as bad as it used to be, right? But it still may come up and control her behavior to some extent. But she doesn't look at that and say, oh, I'm a failure. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm talking about. I shouldn't write any books. I shouldn't teach people anything. She doesn't do that because she understands that her real nature has space for her humanity. Her real nature has space for the conditioning. Her real nature has space for the personality, and her real nature has space for the fact that it will show itself from time to time. That's not a problem. That's not something that she has to conclude bad things about. It's actually an opportunity for her to practice being what she is. And when she does, it may not come right away. The relief may not come right away, but it always does. It has to. That's something that you have to understand. No matter how bad it is, no matter how upset you are, no matter how deep the suffering is, right? If you sit still and pay attention to your true nature, you have to experience the relief. It may not happen right away. You may not get the relief right away. You may have to practice meditation for a while before you start to get the openings that happen, the relief that happens, the glimpses of the truth that happen. So that's the message today. Don't let your thought process trick you into believing that meditation is about changing things and controlling things and fixing things and making things better. One of the things that I have been doing with my clients in my psychotherapy practice is when people are going through difficult times, when people are upset, right? A lot of the conventional therapeutic approaches are to talk with them about what they're thinking. Cognitive therapy, talk with them about what they're thinking. Talk with them about how they're feeling. See if we can heal it, fix it, change it, right? That's not a very effective approach, right? That's why a lot of conventional psychotherapy say it's unrealistic to expect people to change much, right? That gives the therapist an out, you see.
It could help.
Yeah, of course it could help, but the extent to which it can help compared to what's possible is a whole different story. So what I do now with people when they're in that place is I say, look, just see if you can sit still quietly and be with what's happening. And when I say that, I mean don't think about it. If they're thoughts, be with the thoughts, Don't try and change the emotions. If they're emotions, be aware of the emotions. Just be aware of it, right? And just see if you can be still and be present to it. And allow yourself to begin to appreciate and notice the difference that makes. How that clears things up. When you start to look at what's happening from a real place, from a real conscious place, instead of from a program, a personality program, we start to look at it from a real place, you see it for what it is. And when you see it for what it is, you let it go. Or it lets you go, however you want to talk about it, But it comes to a conclusion. Everything comes to a conclusion anyway. Everything is coming and going all the time, right? So to be a master means to let things happen the way they're happening. They are coming and they're going. Nothing is going to stay, right? But we get scared when certain things happen, right? And we want to stop it or control it or change it, right? The practice of meditation is the practice of understanding when you're under dire circumstances, when you're being challenged, when you're in an emotional state, when you're having negative thoughts, when you're apprehensive, when you're fearful of the future or regretting the past, right? To allow yourself to just be present to that instead of identify with it and try and change it. And it'll pass. It has to pass. The only reason things don't pass is because we get involved. We get involved. We engage it. We start thinking about the thoughts that we're having. We start having feelings about the emotions we're feeling. And it just multiplies. It just multiplies. So this is as Richie Davidson said, well-being is a practice. And to practice well-being means to practice being present to the circumstances, including your thoughts and feelings and memories and even behaviors, according to what I just got done reading, and not allow that to define anything, not to conclude anything about that. That's just what's happening. It doesn't mean anything. Human beings are meaning-making machines. They have everything mean something. Isn't it true? You have everything mean something. If it's raining, it means it's not a good day, right? If you win the lottery, it means it's a good day, right? Everything means something. The mind is doing that constantly, right? The problem with that process is that nothing means anything is the truth. Nothing means, it's just what's happening. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, first of all, it's a full-time job. If you're going to be a typical human being, you're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, trying to control your life, right? Full-time job. So it's burning up a lot of energy, right? That's not a good thing because the body needs energy to maintain its health, right? It's not a good thing because you need energy to live life, right? That's why a lot of the Eastern practices involve conserving energy, right? Or eating the right foods that will produce the most energy, right? Conserve energy. Become aware of energy when the energy is being wasted. Learn to relax the physical body. The physical body is burning up energy all the time, but you don't realize it, you don't notice it, because the energy that's burning up is tension. It's tension. It takes energy to be tense, right? And the bodies, most human bodies are in a state of tension. So that means it's burning energy all the time to maintain that muscle tension, all the time. That's why when people wake up, they experience more energy, because they're not wasting it anymore. Yeah, because until you have a glimpse, you don't have any different way of seeing it to relate to, right? So it's just all personality, right? So that's why I keep harping on the fact that in this process, this spiritual path that we're describing, right? The first step in the spiritual path, the one that's critical, is you've got to be aware that you're aware. You've got to discover awareness. You've got to be able to recognize awareness. That's the glimpse, right? Once you get the glimpse and you see from that point of view, right, then you can see when you're not in that state of being. And the practice becomes paying attention to not be in that state of being. That's what I was referring to earlier about paying attention to the hell realm that you're experiencing your life in. And you can't think your way out of it. You can't pray your way out of it. You can't do anything to get out of it other than to wake up. Because when you wake up, you realize you were dreaming. It's a dream to live in a world that doesn't exist, isn't it? Yeah, the world that most people live in doesn't exist. It only exists in their mind. I had a client that I was working with. I just started working with this person. She's really cool, and she's learning to practice meditation and everything. And she was saying that one of the issues in her life that she's dealing with is she's got a crazy mother, right? And people's issues with their parents is pretty common, right? She said she has a crazy mother, and when her mother behaves the way she does, it's very difficult for her not to get upset, and then when she gets upset, she behaves the way she behaves around her mother. And, she's been trying to figure out with her husband how to control this woman when she behaves like that, blah, blah, blah. And what I said to her is, I said, your problem is not your mother. That's the first thing you have to understand. Your problem is not your mother. Your problem is your mind. Because your mind is the reaction to your mother that you're suffering from, not your mother. Your mind is the reaction that you're suffering from, not your mother. I can prove it to you because I can be around your mother and not be upset at all, right? So she can't really be the cause. If she was the cause, she'd cause everybody to be upset, right? But she doesn't. So it's your unique interpretation of her behavior in terms of the thoughts that occur in your mind around her and the feelings that occur and your emotions around her. That's what's upsetting you, not your mother. This is very important to understand. It's what I've been talking about here. It's that the only thing you have to deal with in order to have your life be beautiful is your mind. My teacher says, cultivate a beautiful mind. What does that mean? It means practice being tranquil, practice being relaxed, practice being receptive, practice being open, practice allowing things to happen the way they're happening without interpreting it in a way that has you conclude that it's wrong. But you see, the formal practice is not going to have a lot of traction in your life until in the everyday experiences you're having, you can be awake enough to see where you're at. You can be awake enough to notice when you're in a state of mind, when you're in a reactive condition. And when you notice that, it's not about trying to control it or change it. It's about simply being aware of it and seeing it as it is. When you see it as it is, it will dissipate on its own. You don't have to do anything with it. It's the power of being. It's an ontological mastery. It's not just a different perception, it's the actual reality of what's happening. So it's not a different perception, you're seeing it as it is. For real. You're the real thing, you're the real awareness looking at things, the real world as the real world is. And when that's the case, it's a whole different experience. because you don't have any desire to change anything. It's not necessary to change anything. There's nothing wrong. Take the glasses off so you stop seeing everything in a negative light. Right? There are a lot of people in this practice, in these practices. It's not necessary, but there are a lot of people in these practices, when they have the wake-up experience, they start crying. Because they realize that they're seeing things as they actually are for the first time.
And what if we don't like, what if the awareness doesn't like, then you...
Awareness doesn't have the ability not to like.
Oh, that's good.
Awareness doesn't have the ability to do anything. The only thing the awareness can do is be. The only thing the awareness can do is be present. All it can do is exist. That's it. All it can do is exist. It has no point of view. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't need anything. It's fulfilled. It's fulfilled. It's not trying to be happy. Happiness is the way it is. For a lot of people, that's hard to get because they're so used to not being happy and trying to be happy, right? By getting more or doing whatever you're doing, right? But when you start to experience your true nature, you start to experience that this is different. This happiness isn't a happiness that comes from the world. This isn't a happiness that came from getting what I want. This is a happiness that is literally the nature of the experience, is to be happy and peaceful and satisfied and complete and fulfilled. How could anybody not want to have this experience? You know? And if you want to have this experience, then you've got to take responsibility for what it takes for the experience to occur, which means you have to practice consistently, you have to study the teachings, you have to educate yourself about reality, and then you have to have an absolute commitment. You have to have an absolute commitment to the truth, an absolute commitment to the possibility. I'll never forget, I remember very specifically when I was a young man and I saw things as they are, right? At that moment that I saw things as they are, I made an absolute commitment that no matter what it takes for the rest of my life, I will do everything that I can see as possible in order to have and maintain that experience, even if I don't achieve it before the body dies. This is very important because just to make a commitment with that kind of absolute quality to it is very powerful. Very powerful. Why do you think in occupations that are very competitive, right? Like sports, right? Or show business, very competitive, where the probability of your having success is very small, right? What do you think the state of being needs to be in that situation and keep going and keep delivering 100%, you see? You have to have the attitude, I may fail, nobody may ever know my name, but I will get up every morning and do everything I can in my power to succeed. And when you listen to people who have succeeded, that's always there. That's always there. They never gave up, and they did everything that was in their power to succeed. And that's the same thing here. It's the same thing here. If you have that attitude about these practices and these teachings, probability of your success goes way up. Why? Because you're making it the most important thing in your life, and that's exactly what it is. It's the most important thing in your life, because without this wake-up, without this realization, your life will continue to be a coping process, a struggling process, a resistance process, and a suffering process. That's what's going to happen. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. So if you're clear about that, then you might as well get to it, right?